Hello everybody! So it has been a hot minute since I have made a wrap-up video. I think probably it was just because I felt like I wasn't reading that much and so it wasn't really worth making a video for it. It seems that between October and December of 2019 I read 12 books and I feel like that is a substantial enough number to warrant a wrap-up video. So let's get into it. So the first book on the list is the only book that I actually read in October of 2019. I did an audiobook of this book, and that was Coldhearted Rekha by Lisa Kleypas. Kind of something a little bit out of my comfort zone. It was a historical fiction romance, very heavy on the romance. It was okay. It was definitely steamy at parts, and so I don't think it was lacking in that department, but the story was a little bit lacking for me. I am a big fan of Downton Abbey. The internet kind of told me that this was a perfect book for Downton Abbey fans and stuff like that. And so I was expecting a lot more drama to go along with the romance. It was a good romance, I think, but I would have liked for it to have a little bit more plot and story-driven elements. So overall, I gave Coldhearted Rekha 3.5 out of 5 stars. Getting into the month of November, I picked up book 2 in the Wayward Children series by Seanan McGuire, and that is Down Among Sticks and Bones. This is kind of like a retelling sort of series. It's a series of very, very short books. They're all like under 200 pages, I think. And this one particularly focused on a couple of characters that were introduced to us in the first book in the series. The characters that are akin to Jack and Jill from kind of the original fairy tale. Their story in the Seanan McGuire series is very, very different from the original, and it's weird and it's creepy, and I really, really enjoy it. I will say that I think I enjoyed the first book in the series more than the second book. I don't know, I just really enjoyed maybe the newness of it all because it was a new series to me. So maybe I enjoyed that, and maybe that's why I gave that book a higher rating. I decided to give it 4 out of 5 stars. I thought it was really, really good, really great even, but not quite amazing. The next book that I read, I got onto a little bit of a nonfiction kick, and I decided to listen to the audiobook of Never Cry Wolf by Farley Mowat. This book is a book that I heard about, I believe, from Sasha, from The Wild Sasha. She's another booktuber. Basically, Never Cry Wolf is, I believe it was written in like the 60s, and it's an account of a guy who works, I believe it's in Ottawa, so here in Canada, and he basically is sent on a mission to the Canadian North. I think it's Nunavut. I don't remember all the details, as you can tell. But he gets sent into like one of the territories up north, and he basically has to live alone and study a population of wolves. It's all about kind of what he comes to realize about wolves and how wolves have a very intricate and interesting social structure, but also that they're not like cold-blooded killers like everybody at the time kind of believed. So it's a really interesting story. It's a true story, nonfiction again. I just found it really, really interesting to kind of see somebody doing what I would consider like field biology. Overall, I ended up giving it 4 out of 5 stars just because I found that the writing style started to feel a little bit repetitive at times, and I was kind of over it by the end of the book. After that, I went into another nonfiction book, and that was Year of Yes by Shonda Rhimes. You may have heard of Shonda Rhimes if you've watched shows like Scandal is one that she's a writer for, and Grey's Anatomy is kind of like her big claim to fame kind of thing. Basically, Shonda Rhimes is explaining to us that one year she decided that she would be more open to experiences and she would say yes to more things, more offers that were coming her way. It seems to be a really empowering book for her. She seems to have gone through a lot of really important changes and really positive changes during this year of yes. I had a really good time listening to it. I do consider myself a fan of Grey's Anatomy. I do consider myself a fan of kind of her work in general, and I really liked that she narrated her own audiobook. I thought that was really cool because you kind of got to see, you know, when she made a joke, for example, in her writing, she could deliver the joke properly. So that was really interesting. You can obviously see that she's very talented as a writer. I only gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars though, which is not by any means a bad rating. I think the reason why it wasn't like a 4 or a 5 star for me is I got a little bit annoyed by the end of the book. I would say the second half of the book, her writing style kind of like Never Cry Wolf, it was getting repetitive. It felt like she was kind of like reusing or rehashing the same writing formula over and over again. And in the beginning of the book, it was really interesting because she has a really great writing style and a really great voice in her writing and in her narration. But as the story went on, I was just kind of getting bored of that. And I would say that I got more bored of her writing style and frustrated almost with the rehashing of her writing style than I did with Farley Mowat's in Never Cry Wolf. So that's why I kind of bumped Year of Yes down to a 3.5. The writing thing, I don't know why, it got to me. I think maybe because her writing style was a little bit more specific or like specific to her. So it was very, very apparent. I guess I just would have liked to see a little bit more growth in writing style to accompany her growth in her life. So getting into some of the books that I read in December. December was my best reading month of 2019. I read 8 books, which is quite a lot for me. I started off the month by finishing up Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. This was a book that I did on audiobook, and I absolutely loved it. Actually almost put this book into my favorite books of 2019, but I decided to keep that list only for 5-star books. Outliers, I gave a 4.5. Basically, Outliers is a nonfiction book in which the author, Malcolm Gladwell, goes through a bunch of examples of outliers in today's society. So an example that I've given in the past that he gives at the very beginning of the book is hockey players. Professional hockey players tend to be born in the first few months of the year, and he basically goes into why that is and the reasoning why more professional hockey players might be born in those first 3 months as opposed to any other time of the year. And it's really, really interesting because as he gives examples like this of either groups of people or individuals that are considered outliers in today's society, it becomes very apparent that our world just kind of like lets things slide that are inherently unfair, that just kind of pass unnoticed by a lot of people. The other really strong point I thought that this book had was the narrator. Malcolm Gladwell narrates his own book, and he has a fantastic voice for narration. It's very intriguing yet calming, so I've really, really enjoyed listening to this audiobook, and I would love to pick up more of his books on audiobook. I think the only reason why I haven't been able to give it a 5-star is just that there are some instances in the book where, and I say this in my review on Goodreads, I typed up a review, there are some instances where I'm a little bit worried that even if this is not his intention, it might be communicated to the general public that like correlation equals causation, which is not the case, because he does discuss a lot of correlations. And I'm pretty sure at some point in the book he probably says something like correlation does not equal causation. And I'm sure that he's very good about discussing when something is a fact versus a trend. But I just worry that a book like this has a great potential to miscommunicate its meaning. And so I feel like that kind of like weirded me out a little bit throughout listening to this book. So I wasn't able to give it quite 5 stars, but I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was a fantastic book. And if you're at all interested in like data science and statistics and stuff like that, I highly, highly recommend Outliers by Malcolm Gladwell. It's very, very approachable. So after that, I got back into fiction and I picked up a book that I actually bought at the dollar store, which is interesting. I picked this one up at the dollar store here in town, and that was The Atomic Weight of Love by Elizabeth J. Church. So this book, initially, I was drawn to it because there's birds on the cover, and I studied birds in undergrad, and I was like, yep, that seems like my kind of book. And then as I actually read what it's about, I thought, this is definitely my kind of book. And basically this was a historical fiction. It was actually like very much so a domestic historical fiction, which I did not expect from the synopsis. This book takes us from 1941 up until the 1970s-ish. And it basically follows the main character, Meridian. I want to say Meriden, but it's not Meriden, it's Meridian, like the prime meridian, like that line in Greenwich, England, you know? And it basically follows her from when she is a student in university and she's studying birds, which was like the biggest reason why I wanted to pick this book up, because I was like, hey, I was a university student studying birds, that's cool. And it follows her as she like falls in love with her professor and lives her life spoiler alert, with him. I don't think that's much of a spoiler alert, actually. It basically follows her throughout her life, and I really enjoyed, I'm gonna say, like, the first half of this book. The second half of this book was way too much of, like, a domestic... It's the kind of story that people would, like, joke about, like, a lonely housewife reading, which sounds really harsh and mean, and I don't mean it in any kind of rude way, but it just turned from, like, an interesting historical domestic fiction to, like, something that I was not interested in reading. I don't think I can actually talk about the second half of this book without saying spoiler alert, so if you are at all interested in reading this, do not listen to the rest of this review. Basically, the second half of this book is this lady who married her professor who's 20 years older than her, and she is not having a good marriage with him, and she starts to have an affair with a much younger man. That's basically the second half of this book. It's really tragic towards the end. The main character, I really liked her in the first half of the book. Second half of the book, I was just like, oh, what happened to your reasoning skills? No. I'm gonna stop talking about this book because it's just making me upset thinking about it. Basically, I really enjoyed the first half of this book, did not enjoy the second half at all, and I gave it 3 out of 5 stars. I think that might be a little bit generous. Maybe it's a 2.5, I don't know. I'm gonna set it at 3 for right now. Hey guys, voiceover Nicole here. So we are at the halfway point in this video, and I'm realizing that this video is just getting really long, so I am going to do a part 2 where I go through the rest of the books that I read at the tail end of 2019. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do not hesitate to like and subscribe for future videos, and I will see you in part 2. Bye guys.